without any further ado, can we please welcome the fantastic, the wonderful, the incredible Denise Rue? So Denise, first off, I like your outfit. I'm biased towards you. Your good friend Linda Cherish is one of my mom's good friends. So it makes me extra happy to be able to put you in a seat, put you here. You've actually put me here too in a process because we're doing this together. And so I really enjoy that vibe. Now, would you mind just telling me a little bit, how do you call yourself in public? Not your name, but with respect to the businesses you engage in.
Like, who am I?
What do you do? What do you like doing?
What am I? I am a clinical hypnotherapist. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a psychedelic assisted therapist. I'm an instructor for Fluence training. I'm an advocate. I started the New Jersey Psychedelic Therapy Association to try to educate members of Congress to pass the psilocybin bill. And for 3 years, I was working at a legal psilocybin retreat in Jamaica.
That's incredible. So, maybe we could start. I personally enjoy asking people what brought you to this line of work. What was your driving factor? So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what brought you to doing the work that you do. And was it your upbringing? Was it things you were interested in? When did you do psychedelics to begin with? What was a little bit of that like?
So I came very late in life to psychedelics because I was a good Catholic girl, and my sister is here today. She will attest to that. So I came to being a therapist by way of clinical hypnosis. I started working with clients. Then I went to social work school. Then I worked in hospice. And my first job was working at a community mental health center. And I was working with really, really marginalized population. And almost every other person coming through for an evaluation had childhood sexual abuse. And you would think that I would have been trained in that in school, but it really seemed like we didn't get proper training. And so I said, this is a real taboo. It's an epidemic. So I just started learning more and more about it. I got some different certificates. I started working with groups for female survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And about the same time, I was reading the research that was coming out of Johns Hopkins and NYU, and it just kind of clicked, like, this is it. This can alleviate so much suffering. But I had never done psychedelics, so I said, well, I could never do this with people unless I've done it myself. So I booked a retreat in Jamaica, and I went, and I booked a 10-day retreat, and it was 4 doses. And after my first dose, I just turned to the founder and I said, I can't go back to my job. How do I, even though I believe in therapy so much, but when you know that this healing is available, how do you go back to working in such a limited way? I mean, I know now that you need both, but, and so they invited me back as a therapist, and I moved there in September of 2019, and I was there for 39 months.
Something that's interesting that I hear from many different facilitators. Some learned on the street, they had a great experience. They mentored under, say, someone off the hate who's been doing LSD therapy for 30 or 40 years. And then I talked to someone who went to Johns Hopkins after getting undergrad at Harvard, and then they got a CIAS certification and a MAP certification. I'm always curious, what do you really learn in school versus what's really required to be good? And when I say good, I mean actually do the job of true healing. What do you learn in school versus what you learned kind of through your own experiences?
Well, you need both. I kind of did it backwards, I guess, because I was thrown into the retreat world. And so I was learning on the job. And now I teach a course at Fluence, so they're getting all of the research, and that's great. That's important. It's essential, right? We have to be grounded in research. But it's not the only thing. That's a very Western dominated idea that the only thing that matters is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, because we have centuries of indigenous wisdom and we have a lot of qualitative work to draw on. So you need both, but and what you have to embody to do this work is, I say, at least 50% of the work, because who you have to be, how you have to show up. And that means for me, I had to do a lot of my own work for decades before coming to this. Because, I mean, it's maybe sounds grandiose. I don't know, you kind of have to be a pure vessel. That does sound a little grandiose, but it's like I'm not doing the work, I am a vessel for it. I'm working for a higher power, if you will, when I work with psilocybin. And I'm just holding space. And I think because I've kind of been in the muck with my own healing, through different losses, especially that I've experienced in my own life, that has helped me show up for people. And I'm not afraid of the really hard stuff when people are really suffering. At this age, I don't know that I could have done this when I was in my 20s or 30s, but I feel like I can show up and be present and not be rocked. Like I can be a firm foundation for someone who's going through whatever they need to go through.
So something I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this archetype kind of evolved out of what I just heard you utter. And would you identify to any extent or degree with the notion of being kind of the wounded healer, right? The person who had wounds and wanted to heal themselves, and through healing themselves recognize the transformational properties of certain compounds, entheogens, ritual practice, etc. Does that resonate with you, and in what way? And potentially, could you speak further about something we outlined on the phone, was the necessity to potentially engage in certain substance use or medicinal plant use, so that you would have the experience and be able to know to handle that experience, and thus relay the messages that you've received and do so with integrity, grace, and character.
Yeah. I think the whole notion of being a wounded healer is really resonates with me. And I always kind of ran by the belief, well, let me turn this poison into medicine, and let me turn it into medicine for myself and others. Because it's not made whole unless it's shared. So if I learn something, and I'm always learning something through my own work, then I can bring it to my clients. So even if I go through something really, really challenging in life or in a psychedelic session, I always think, well, I can bring this back to my clients.
Do you think that's an outlook that extends to each and every one of us in this room and the people watching? The notion that, say you encounter hardship, your car is, say, stolen, or your house is broken into, or someone dies tragically in a plane crash. Do you think there's an upside ever to those situations that can seem, at least superficially or initially, quite challenging? Like, hey, your friend dies, but he did what he loved, and that was maybe the cosmic time, and I can maybe carry on some of his kind words and model his behavior on his behalf. Would you mind describing potentially any of these hurdles that you encountered and how you transmuted them or alchemized them into something that might benefit the all?
Yeah, I think we all have that opportunity. I mean, that's the root of empathy, right? To know that I'm suffering, but I alone don't suffer. And it can actually join us to one another. We're joined through our suffering. So we all have that opportunity. And I think one of the issues with like westernized medicine is that we view our symptoms as pathologies. I have depression, or I have, PTSD, or it is upon me, like the Irish say, it is upon me. And rather than snuff it out with pills and pathologize it, what if it's something that we can enter into and it joins us with each other? And that's what I see in the work on the retreats, is that when other people are healing, oh, that person is suffering too. Oh gosh, that's funny. My father is alcoholic. Oh, this happened to me too. Oh, maybe I'm not so alone and aberrant. I'm not just in my own little cocoon of pain.
Do you think in these events of trauma and sadness, and you mentioned, hey, look, maybe my father's an alcoholic, whatever that is, that in recognizing potentially the synchronicity or over the overlapping experiences that suggest a mutual shared misery, that there's an element of divine irony that connects us even further to the people that we can grow into loving and better getting to know and potentially helping?
But that's a big message of psychedelics, right? That we all are interconnected. I mean, it wears away this illusion of separateness.
And that's awesome you say that, and I think that's why I am so proud of what District216 is trying to do. It's the reason I do these interviews. It's the reason I show up. It's the reason I help here, is because, and we talked on the phone, so I think we share this to a certain extent. Tell me I'm wrong. But if you were climbing in a mountain, potentially, right? We were climbing a mountain together, and this guy's like, and we had to get up there, right, for food or something. This guy's like, I have a helicopter. It's on a piece of paper. Do you want to eat it? I'd be like, of course. Right? I want to make sure it's not going to kill me, but nevertheless, I know we have a couple more things to discuss. I think we hit a number of the points. Would you mind just telling me briefly what makes you most proud about the work you do, and one experience you had that really opened your mind to the power of psychedelics?
It's really hard to pick one.
Anyone that's relevant or important.
So this is something that happened recently, and I like working with younger women, and seeing. Like, I see their power, right? I see that they're just like, just ready to just blossom, right? But they don't see it. They're suffering so much. And this one woman on retreat, I said something that was very little to her, but it stuck. I said, someday you will know your power. And she called me maybe 2 or 3 years later, and she said, you know what? If you hadn't said that to me, I don't know that I'd be looking. And she goes, now I know what you meant. But she just needed someone to see her. And there's just so many stories. I think whenever we connect authentically and heart connection with people, you don't need psychedelics. I mean, you can see, you can be the mirror for people and give them a sense of themselves, a sense of their goodness and their kindness. And I mean, that's been a gift to me in my own work with psilocybin. It's just getting through all those childhood wounds and not being stuck in that sense of my own disempowerment, right? And being less than. And so just to be able to give that to other people through traditional therapy and through psychedelics is really such a blessing. I feel so grateful that I have this career.
And thanks for blessing us with your presence. I think it's so awesome that we get to have various people from all different backgrounds that have all different experiences. And I think that's what makes this experience rich, at least for me. I can't speak for the audience, but I hope they feel similarly. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I believe you have a presentation to give.
I do.
If someone was struggling and they couldn't see their own value, and you had a 1 minute long PSA 1950s style, like, do not smoke cannabis, it will make you crazy, with kind of funny jazz music in the background, what would you say in, 5 sentences?
You might have given me a little lead time on this one.
Doesn't make it fun for me. Come on.
Okay. But I'm trying to be positive. I'm not trying to be...
No, this isn't... It's like good 1950s, not like, Nixon,
Was
Eisenhower.
there?
I wasn't there. Who was?
that.
I thought you were born in like 1982. What are we talking about?
No. I don't think we were getting great messages back then. What I would give people the message, you are perfect the way you are. You are loved. You are cherished. You are worthy. Believe in yourself and believe in community, right? Because I think one thing in our Western culture, we're kind of sold a bill of goods. We're very independent and we're going to make it on our own. But we're not independent. We're interdependent, and we need each other. And I think that's important. It's like, yeah, do your work and get clear and clean, but we heal in relationships. We're wounded in relationships, so the only way we can heal is relationally. So I don't know that was a,
I thought
a
that was
good
pretty darn good.
60-second spot, but and plus, this is your brain on drugs.
Let me go get an egg in a frying pan.
Yeah.
So you have your presentation. I'm going to let you do that.
What I'm going to do this evening is talk a little bit about trauma in general and how trauma experienced in childhood goes in so deeply, as opposed to trauma, a single traumatic incident that affects us as adults, which can also go in very deeply. Then we're going to talk about why psilocybin can heal in ways that traditional talk therapy simply cannot. And I'm constantly in awe of this medicine. And my experience is primarily with psilocybin. I worked at the psilocybin retreat. I've worked with hundreds of people. I've worked with other medicines, but I will talk about the mushroom because that's kind of my baby. And then we'll talk about some caveats because psychedelics are not for everyone in all circumstances. And then we're going to end with a inner child meditation to give you an opportunity to work with some aspect of yourself that arises and do some relational healing. Okay, so I'm going to invite you, we're so up in our head in our culture, and this topic may bring up some feelings. So just notice what's coming up for you as we talk about these things. Notice what sensations are coming up, what emotions are coming up, and rather than thinking, uh-oh, this is happening, I really invite you to look at it like, okay, this is healing that wants to happen. So let me just get curious about it. Also, some things that might come up as we talk about this is, what did you learn about your own trauma or trauma in general growing up? There's sometimes a real taboo about it. After all, honor thy father and mother is the 5th commandment. And it may bring up a lot of discomfort, like you're being disloyal. Some of us may have heard things like, well, you don't have it so bad, or I'll give you something to cry about. So just notice what comes up for you. I like this quote by Massimila and Bud Harris. The process of remembering is not one of judging either ourselves or our abusers. It is looking at ourselves and giving up denial and illusion for the love of truth, the truth of our own reality, and the acceptance of our potentials. So when we're talking about what happened to us in childhood, there's no blame. There's no blame towards anyone. It just is. One of my favorite expressions is, there is no cure for hot or cold. It just is, and this is how it affected us. So here's some definitions of trauma. Any experience that causes the child unbearable psychic pain or anxiety. It overwhelms the usual defensive measures or the protective shield. And remember, a trauma experience in childhood is before children have defense mechanisms. So there really isn't much of a protective shield. We talk about big T and little t trauma. So a big T trauma might be emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. And little t traumas, all those things that should have happened and didn't. Here's another quote that I really like by Judith Herman. Traumatic events call into question basic human relationships. They breach the attachments of family, friendship, love, and community. They shatter the construction of the self that is formed and sustained in relation to others. They undermine the belief systems that give meaning to human experience. They violate the victim's faith in a natural or divine order and cast the victim into a state of existential crisis. Now, one thing I'd like you to consider is what it was like to be in a child's body. When we look back and we talk about our childhood, it's really challenging to remember that we were in these little bodies and our nervous systems were undeveloped. And these gods, our parents or other adults, are big, and we are supposed to respect adults. So we forget very much how these events impact us on the nervous system. And this is something that I thought was very, very interesting when I studied hypnosis, which is essentially trance. In childhood, kids are in trance all the time, which means that everything is going in very, very deeply. So characteristic brain waves from birth to 24 months are delta waves, 2 to 6 years theta waves, 6 to 12 years alpha waves. So essentially, this child is in trance. And when we're in trance, what happens? We just take it all in as gospel. So to a child, everything that's coming in is just being soaked up, and emotions are tsunamis. And to that developing nervous system, it isn't like, ooh, I feel some anxiety. It is, I am flooded. And we can talk about if the parent doesn't give that child a vocabulary, doesn't see the child, oh, it looks like you're frustrated. Come, let me hold you. If they don't get it, there's nothing for that, nowhere for that energy to go. It's just swirling around in there. And the child will manage as well as they can. And so the child adapts. They adapt to survive in the family system. Now, it's interesting to think about what you may have had to bury growing up. In many homes, the sickest member of the family is the one who's like the tyrant, and maybe only one person gets to express anger, and everyone else has to bury their feelings. So you may have had to bury anger, you may have had to bury your sadness, the right to say no, the right to even have boundaries. My mother did a very interesting thing, and I think she thought it was really clever. But when I was bad, whatever bad is for like a 5-year-old, I would become invisible, and she'd say, "Where's my good Denise?" And, "Oh, the gypsies came and took my good Denise." And so, like, for a child, that's death, not to be connected, right? That's our main goal. We want to be connected with our caretaker. So she can't see bad Denise. So I would go into the closet and I would jump out, "Here I am, Mommy. Here's your good Denise." And she goes, "Oh, I got my good Denise back." Well, what do you think that did? What's the little brain mechanism that goes off unconsciously? Ooh, bad. Bad is not lovable. So that's got to go underground. And good. Good is helpful. Good is probably someone who doesn't have needs. Good is always positive and happy. And so that's what you're going to do. You know, it's like, yeah, here I am. I'm the good girl. Give me love. And it stays stuck that way because until you become conscious of it, because it's just down there in your shadow. And what do you have to be? What do you have to bury? And who do you have to become? Do you have to become the helper? Do you have to become the hero? Are you the scapegoat, the class clown? Like, what is your role? So the child is very, very, very savvy at picking up all these cues, both overt and covert, about what is acceptable, what will keep me in connection with, what's going to keep me in connection with my caregivers. So you will often become something that allows you to survive in that system. And it may not be your authentic self. And so when people hit that middle-aged, crisis, they wake up and they go like, well, this isn't me, but it's who I had to become in order to survive. But you're not stuck. So how do we adapt? We dissociate, we check out. If our spirit is being dishonored, if we're being yelled at, sexually abused, physically abused, we're checking out, right? And so that happens automatically, but the trouble with dissociating as a habitual response is if you're not here in your body, you can't be present in your own life, and you can't keep yourself psychically and physically safe because you're checked out. A child will always blame herself or himself. We call this the negative parental introject. That is a way of coping that allows them some control, okay? You know, you're a bad girl, shame on you. Okay, well, then I'm bad, I'm very bad. Okay, well, how can I be good? So that inner critic, right, that gets pretty well honed, that we come by that honestly. We repress, we numb, we zoning out, video games, alcohol, drugs, shopping. We become good girl, good boy in order to get love. Hypervigilance, that's another thing. If you're growing up in a home that's unsafe and you don't know when the next blow is coming psychically or physically, you're going to become real alert, real fast. And so you learn to read the room, right? What's going to happen when dad comes home? And so these are people who become empaths. They're very, very good. They become therapists. But the trouble is, like if all of the child's antennae are out there, well, what are you going to think about me? Then there's no one in here who's living your life. So we have to bring that energy back in. And if you're living in a home that's chaotic, there's no control, there's nothing that you can predict, you internalize control, okay? However that looks. You're either going to be straight A student, or you're going to start lining up your shoes. You're going to make some control. You're going to start living life like a chess game. So these are just, okay, so, you know, these parts that we have to develop in order to adapt, they get frozen in. We get frozen, stuck in trauma time. And these parts, often very, very young parts, they don't know that the war is over. They're interacting with the world as if they're back in their family of origin. And if any of you have ever been taken over by road rage, you have experienced a part of you that was repressed is coming out. So it's great to know all these things, and I get people in therapy who are, boy, they've got the lingo down. But why doesn't traditional talk therapy always hit the spot? Because if trauma is pre-linguistic, if it's before we're narrating it, right, and it's just in the body, you really can't access that through talk. And unless you're doing some really good somatic therapy, it's hard to access that. So when I was talking about children being in trance, that state, what we call it state-dependent learning, and you can't access that unless you're back in that state, so in another trance state. So you can do that through hypnosis, holotropic breath work, EMDR, somatic experiencing, and psychedelics, which, and I did all of these things before I started doing psychedelics with my clients, and there's just no comparison, the healing level. I'm going to go through each of these one by one, but these are the areas that psychedelics can really, really offer deep, deep healing. So we talked about that internal critic that most of us have. not really having the experience of deep inner compassion. So in my experience, the first time people have embodied compassion is through psychedelics. And people know, like, well, I know I should love myself, and so I'm going to take a bubble bath, or I'm going to go on a trip, and I know I should be kind to myself. But it isn't that embodied sense, like, I love myself. I deserve deep, deep love. And to work with someone who's in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they've never experienced self-compassion before, that's quite extraordinary. And it also allows an opening to compassion for others, even one's abusers. So something that happens with psychedelics very spontaneously often is that the individual may regress to an age where a traumatic event happened. And they're not only thinking about, ooh, that's what happened to me when I was 5, they become that person. And it's really quite extraordinary, and they'll take on the posture, the vocal intonation of that child. And by going through the traumatic experience and doing so in a safe environment where they're able to access all the emotions and purge them, that allows all that energy that's been trapped in there to be released. And it's no longer stuck in the body. So ego dissolution, this is something that we hear of a lot in psychedelics. People come in, I want ego dissolution, I want ego dissolution. So we know with classic psychedelics that one of the ways it works is by down-regulating the parts of the brain that we call the default mode network. And that is where our sense of who I am, right? Who I am, who am I in relationship to you, the stories that we tell ourselves, right? And it's that incessant chatter. So with psychedelics, the default mode network, if the dose is high enough, will quiet. And for many people, they say, this is the first time that little voice ever shut up, and oh my God, what a relief. And it allows other parts of the brain to communicate. So that gives you a chance for new learning, new putting the puzzle pieces together in a different way that we can't when we're kind of clamped down. So with a moderate to high dose, ego dissolution can happen, and it can be experienced in a very pleasant way, like oceanic boundlessness, but it can also be quite challenging, dissolving. It can be quite dreadful. So the person has to have enough ego strength to get through the ego dissolution. Because after that, that's often when you have your mystical experience. So we know through the research that having a mystical experience on a psychedelic trip is really linked to improved therapeutic outcomes. And I mean, mystical experiences are not seen only with psychedelics. I mean, mystics have them. You can have a spontaneous mystical experience. It's not just with psychedelics, but we found that people can access a mystical experience with some regularity if the conditions are right. So what does this mean? Is that A mystical experience means you lose this sense of yourself as separate, right? This ego-bound separateness. You merge with the whole. There's a sacred quality, a noetic quality, or a knowing. It just feels real. It feels right. It feels realer than real, people say. It's associated with a positive mood, expansive. Time and space are meaningless. It's ineffable. You can't put it into words. And it's paradoxical, like I'm everything and I'm nothing. So this is a very, very big topic, that psilocybin psychedelics do give access to repressed memories. Once the defense mechanisms go away, people can access things about their past that they had repressed. They can also access very positive things from their childhood, and that can be quite new, that, oh, it wasn't all bad. In this realm of accessing repressed memories, you really do have to be careful to have a very safe guide, because somebody who is unskilled can say things and kind of lead you. We say that nature doesn't waste energy. So if something comes up in a psychedelic session, we take it seriously, not necessarily literally. So it may seem that someone is accessing a repressed memory, and I know this happened, and it may have happened, but we also have to remember, we're not just accessing our own individual post-natal biology. We are accessing intergenerational memories. We can be accessing collective memories. So when things come up, they may not have happened to us. In my experience in working with people who access traumatic memories, there are three responses. People come out of it, and even though they're accessing and remembering pretty difficult things, it's a relief. It's like, oh, I get it. I know now why I started putting on weight when I was 14. This all makes perfect sense. That it fits in with what they've kind of known all along. Another response that people have is come out of it, oh, go, that's not me. That I know that wasn't me. I was, that happened to my mother, and I was just processing it. And the most difficult is when people come out and they just don't know. They're in this state of gray. And that takes a lot of really, really careful work. When people are trying to figure out, did this really happen to me? So this is one reason that, we don't play around with these substances. So we talked about trauma being stored in the body. This is something that I've never seen in any other modality, but the traumatic release. So people release trauma in the body in three ways: through liquid, movement, or sound. So we see people on retreat who are having tremors, right? Their legs are shaking. And if you've ever seen a nature film and the gazelle escapes from the lion, and you see the gazelle, the hide kind of ripples, that is a normal way that our body releases tension. But we don't do that. We clamp down as humans so often. So you'll see people under the influence going through these tremors, and it's wonderful. It's like, yay, that's that's less that you have to hold. Tears, psilocybin tears, a lot of mucus, having to urinate a lot. That's all ways that the body is releasing stored trauma. And then through sound, so crying, screaming, laughing, just having this purge. Also, people can go right into different vocalizations and babbling and harmonically healing. It's all spontaneous. And it's like, well, this is weird, but weird is where the work gets done. And it's really, it's quite miraculous to see. I talked a little bit about intergenerational trauma. We know through the study of epigenetics that we don't just carry our own biology, that we can be carrying trauma and resilience and positive qualities from our ancestors. So people will come out of a trip and go, that was really big. I don't think that was me. And Stanislav Grof writes a lot about this, and they'll check back with their ancestors, and maybe the mother will admit, yeah, I was raped. Or so we're carrying this, and it's incredibly miraculous to witness. I have to say, I've seen pretty wild things happen. Another thing that we can carry, consciousness just doesn't happen the moment we're born. Again, Stanislav Grof has done a lot of work with this, and he, through thousands and thousands of LSD trips and holotropic breath work, he found that people were bringing back uncanny memories from their birth experience. So he characterized them as the 4 birth perinatal matrices. So in the womb, good womb, bad womb, the second birth perinatal matrix. And I don't have time to get into all of this, but to see people go through their birthing experience is very, very profound. And he found that when people would relive their birth experience, that present day issues were resolved. Now, this is when somebody is going through a reenactment of trauma. If you have a facilitator or guide with you and you're receiving the response that you didn't get in childhood, that can just heal that wound. It can be a beautiful bridge. And I worked with someone who was reliving her sexual abuse as a child, and her body went through the same reaction that it did when she was abused as a child. She urinated, she vomited, and then she came back into her room, and I was sitting with her, and she was still that little girl, and she was processing, and all I said to her was, it wasn't your fault. And that was it. That's all she needed to hear, because her mother had not said that. Her mother had blamed her. So all she needed to hear, it wasn't your fault. And then she could take that in and start healing from there. It wasn't my fault. So this is quite a privilege when this happens. As I said, we can access positive childhood memories. The brain has a negativity bias. So when we're looking back on childhood, we often forget that, maybe some good stuff did happen. And psilocybin will often, I've seen that they'll give you a very positive memory so you can access that memory and strengthen it before you go into the more difficult memory. To remember, I worked with somebody and she remembered that at age 5 she would run away, and she would pack up her little wagon, and I'm like, yeah, tell me more about her, because she was really courageous, right? She's still in you. And so in integration, we strengthened that little girl who was advocating for herself, saying, this isn't right. I deserve so much more. So, being able to access and remembering those positive aspects of ourself that we can forget. And then finally, I found people consistently experience deep, deep gratitude on these medicines. And so that can kind of put it all in perspective. Like, yes, this happened to me, and yet I'm so grateful for all of this, and so great of what I've created in spite of the challenges. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So those are some ways that psychedelics can help heal childhood traumas in ways that we just can't access. Let me just talk a little bit about some care that should be taken with psychedelics. You do have to give attention to the set and the setting. What is the client's mindset going into this experience? Are they realistic? Are they feeling like, well, I'm 70 and I've never looked at my childhood, but I'm going to do this once and then I'll be over it, right? Well, that's not very realistic. So you have to, in preparation and in the medicine space, you have to give good attention to set and setting. And I really like this quote by Sam Harris. Some people cannot afford to give the chain of sanity even the slightest tug. So there are times in our lives when we can't handle being temporarily destabilized for 5 or 8 hours on a psychedelic drug. And there are some people who simply can't handle it. People with psychotic disorders, people with bipolar disorder, although they're doing more studies about that. So they're not for everyone. What I would recommend before people embark on a psychedelic journey, you probably should have some sense of what went on in your childhood and addressed it in traditional therapy, especially if you've had severe trauma. I wouldn't suggest psychedelics as your first entree into exploring. You want to make sure that, do you have distress tolerance? Can you put up with some deep discomfort that may come up for 5 hours? Do you have healthy coping strategies? Do you have a good support system? And do you have a guide to keep you safe? Because it can get a little hairy out there. So I would recommend having a guide. So I'd like to, if we have time before the meditation, entertain some questions, and then we'll go into the inner child meditation.
Talked about the big T and the little t traumas. I think it's somewhat easy to understand big traumas that are active and obvious. But can you talk a little bit about the trauma of maybe neglect, or when you look back and you're like, well, there was nothing there, but there was also nothing there, kind of thing.
Right. And I think the big thing about neglect is it's the air that the child breathes, right? And since there aren't overt things seeming to happen, then there's nothing to pin on, well, that happened and that was kind of whack. But we forget that we are emotional beings, and so we may be tended to physically, right? You may even be tended to very well physically, have a lot of material wealth. But what about emotional needs, right? Those are as essential. So if a child's way of being in the world is just disregarded, then that's a whole aspect of being human. I would argue the greatest aspect. So if you're being neglected in your emotional development and well-being, I would say that is just as, if not more, damaging to people. And when people experience emotional neglect, they often don't give themselves permission. Well, look, other people had it so much worse. And it's like, yeah, they did. And comparisons aren't particularly helpful. But this is where that honesty comes in. It's my parents or whomever, perhaps they did the best they could because they're coming from their upbringing as well, and they're damaged. But this happened, and this is how it affected me. And so this is where the clear seeing comes in, and knowing that we have to be honest and look at this so we don't continue the mistakes, especially if we do have our own children, right? The buck stops here.
Could you tell us about your current practice? And you were at the retreat center, you said, for 3 years. And what are you doing now? How can we access you?
Not groups of 10 people taking massive doses of psilocybin, I can tell you that, over the course of a week. So that was like, oh no. I mean, I knew that was going to happen, but it was really sad. So I'm doing traditional therapy, and I moved into education, and hopefully I will be starting to work retreats in Colorado. Yeah, for the goal is for trauma survivors and first responders. Yeah, and hey, under the personal use law, it should be coming to a state near you.
You focus a lot on psilocybin and the classical psychedelics, but there's been a lot of research about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD. So I'm just curious if you've worked with MDMA and how that would compare to the classical psychedelics for trauma therapy.
So MDMA is the therapy of choice for PTSD. I would say MDMA is gentler, and that if you had the choice, maybe lead with MDMA or do the hippie flip, a little MDMA with 3 grams psilocybin. It's just gentler, and it's heart opening. So it's wonderful to give people the experience of compassion, and it is less potentially re-traumatizing because sometimes people aren't ready for the high dose psilocybin.
And when you say the high dose psilocybin, I'm curious, like what kind of doses you're talking about, what number of grams?
So it depends on whether people have been on antidepressants and how long they've been weaned off. So we know that if long-term antidepressant use, it downregulates the serotonergic system. So people should be off of their SSRIs for at least 3 to 6 months, right? Or there's nothing for the psilocybin, the psilocin to attach to. And okay, so on our retreat, we were using very high doses. So 3 to 5 grams, that's a starter dose. And then and not everybody launches on even 3 to 5 grams. I mean, we would be getting up into the teens because it's not only your serotonin system, it's your psychic fortress, okay? So if you're in your 60s and 70s, and you've been on medications, and and you grew up in a home where emotions are bad, and so to feel something that's a big deal. So sometimes it's almost like people need to be dynamited into it. I don't agree with doing that. I mean, I think that people should have gentler on-ramps, because the big doses of psilocybin can really re-traumatize people if they're not ready. So I think in the clinical trials, they're using up to 4.5 grams. In Oregon, the highest dose you can get, I believe, is 4 or 5 grams. And that's in the psilocybin service centers. And I think there's a 3,000 person waiting list.
In one of your earlier slides, did I understand correctly that children are not in the beta state? They're always in alpha or delta or
So
others?
I think there's a characteristic brain wave. From 0 to 2 years, they're in delta primarily. Okay, then from 2 to 6 years, they're in, I think, theta. From 6 to 12 years, they're in alpha. Primarily, not all the time, but that is the characteristic brain wave for those ages. But if you've been around little kids, I mean, they're in it. Whatever they're doing, they're just in it. They're in it. They don't have this metacognition. Like, well, if I paint this picture, mom won't like it. I mean, they don't have that yet. It can come online pretty early, though.
I mean, is there a notion of trauma that could be more complexly residing in your nervous system, your psyche, your subconscious? So say the person that gets traumatized by a latte that's too hot at Starbucks versus the guy with no limbs coming back from Basra who grew up in, I don't know, Port-au-Prince. Who has more trauma? Is that even relevant? And that's obviously being sarcastic and joking, but I'm serious. Are there gradations of trauma? Should the one guy that got burned at Starbucks be as upset at the universe as the guy that was raised in the slums of Haiti?
He can do whatever. It depends on how he's going to make meaning out of that.
So do you think potentially there could be the opportunity for more meaning that comes from potentially deeper levels of trauma, and the way in which you resolve it might be more cathartic than the fellow with the venti?
Well, the fellow who had the trauma in his 40s, that if it's hysterical, it's historical. I mean, if he's traumatized by that, it's not just about the latte. That goes back. So let's follow that down. But we're meaning-making machines. So I think when we have those, like, sort of trigger moments, that's where we get curious. Like, okay. All right, what was going on there? Let's follow that down. And it's usually has roots in childhood.
Can we get a round of applause for Denise Rue?
Thank you.
If you were on a deserted island, what book would you bring if you were never going to get home and you had no friends? I mean, it's a deserted island. You're never leaving. What book
It
were
was
you
kind of
bringing?
like Jamaica. And that was one of my biggest questions, like, what books am I going to take? And I took Rumi. I took a few books of poetry. Oh, what would I take? Oh, my God. Don't make me choose.
I'll accept Sufi wisdom and
Yes. But probably something thicker.
mystical
if it's only-
Islam freestyle.
Yeah.
You're still on that terrible island. It's not Jamaica. It's much smaller.
Okay.
Nobody's there. What album would it be? And it would have to be vinyl.
And it has to be vinyl. Oh, probably Joni Mitchell's Blue.
Now it gets a little darker. If you ended up in hell for eternity, what song would be your greatest fear to endure for the entire duration of eternity?
Oh, something by the Bee Gees.
You know, be a good one. Satan's like, you're staying alive. And the joke is, and the demons go, but you're dead. So this one's a little bit more creative. If you could create your own religion or cult, if you'd prefer, what would be your cosmology, metaphysics, or the like?
Wow. Okay. Well, not a cult leader. Got to get that straight. What would it be?
Chief
Boy.
priestess?
High priestess. So what? Okay. Gosh, it would be so simple. It would just be so simple. It would be, and it sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's just we are love. And I think at our highest level, we connect with others in love. But, and I would bring in there's so many great things to read. I mean, so many of the great, like the Upanishads. I mean, just like bring it on.
Like a book club of love.
A book club of love, yes.
Can we make a salute to that? I wouldn't mind being a deacon. But I'll accept bishop or whatever.
Yeah.
I just want a funny outfit. So, again, another dark question. Do we live in a simulation, and if so, which member of the Illuminati world government cabal runs it?
Oh, my goodness.
And don't say Jeff Bezos. Everyone says Jeff Bezos or Sergey Brin. Elon Musk, rarely.
You know what? I know that people are interested in this, and it's a wonderful thing to explore. But this is where I live here, because this is where the work needs to be done.
Would you venture a conjecture just for levity's sake?
Who's running it?
It's more of a joke. I mean, I don't know. I hope Tupac from Bermuda.
That's good. How about I'm out of my league here, Cole. I'm sorry.
So if you could take a psychedelic with any person of any period of time in human history, or the Anunnaki, I'd consider them relevant in Sumeria, what drug would it be? With whom would it be? Where would you trip, and on what substance?
Gosh, I think I would still choose psilocybin, because that's my baby. Maybe Rumi.
Where would you do it? Would you do it on the Silk Road? Were you thinking like Kabul or Tashkent?
Maybe in. I like the Caribbean. I do like the Caribbean. I like
Kitts,
to be
St.
able.
Bart's, Bermuda, Jamaica. You want to go to Jamaica?
Never been there. I just like to be able to go out in the ocean. Yeah, Rumi. Oh no, Carl Jung. Definitely.
What would you take with Carl Jung?
Psilocybin.
Is there a substance you're uber fascinated with, yet haven't had the opportunity or chance or desire to indulge in the present moment?
I have not used ayahuasca. That's a terrible thing to say. I feel like it's a real hole in my education. But I never had, I was working and I never got away. And now I've been working. But I would like to go on an ayahuasca retreat. Mother Ayahuasca.
So, if you could live anywhere in the world...
Santa Barbara.
Wait. We're only giving you 10 grand a month. Are you sure you don't want to go somewhere else? That buys you a studio and a car payment.
Oh, not even.
Anywhere but Santa Barbara, please.
Okay.
Carpinteria counts.
No.
Actually, go to Ventura. Why not?
Well, it also depends on where I'd like to live near my children, but that's impossible.
This
right
is a
at the
vacation.
moment.
3
This
months.
is a vacation.
3 months, 10 grand.
I'll go to Italy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where in Italy?
We're in Italy.
I'm a paisano.
The Amalfi Coast.
Positano?
Okay.
Nice. There's better places in southern Italy.
Okay.
Would you describe one of the most impactful psychedelic experiences and what made it so?
Oh, gosh. Wow. Again, it's really hard to nail one down. I think my first ever one was pretty impactful. I was dealing with a lot of grief. My dad had died, and my husband had died within 4 months of each other. And this was probably 5 years after the fact, but I was still deeply grieving. And that night, I worked through the grief. And one thing that was pretty remarkable, this is in Jamaica, and I had a facilitator who stuck with me. And as I talked about grief and the sorrow of it and the weight of it, the almond trees, the branches kind of got gnarly and bare and reached out to me like in Snow White. And then when I talked about gratitude for the love that I'd had from these people, the branches burst into blossom. And when I would talk about grief, like I would feel like I would be sinking into the mud. So it was such a firsthand experience of how powerful our thoughts are. And yes, grief, there's the woe and the searing pain of it, but there's also the gratitude, and the gratitude for having had that love, even if you lost it. And that was really, really powerful and profound. But there have been so many amazing, difficult experiences.
And that was psilocybin?
Oh, always.
How many grams? I'm just curious.
That one? 3.
I need to take some
The
soon.
highest I ever had was 10 grams. Wow. And never again. That was my 3rd trip there. It was extraordinarily difficult, but I got to feel all these things that as a therapist are really important for me to feel. Like I felt suicidal depression. I felt what it was like to be in the throes of being chased by an assailant. It was like I really did think I was not going to come back from that. But these are all things that my clients experience. So it was such a blessing for me. Like, oh, now I know what that feels like. So that was an example of how you turn that difficulty into, well, how can I bring this to my clients?
So my last question, and we'll drop into the Tao, etc. The nature of consciousness, what is it in 60 seconds?
Again, I think that's an impossible question, and I know this is a very interesting question. A lot of people get caught up in this. It's not contained in this little skull. It's everywhere. It's grand. And it preceded us, and it will, and we will, it's just there. Meditation. Okay. So in this meditation, I'm just going to invite you to, we're going to do like a body scan to release tension from head to toe. And then I'm going to invite you to allow a part of yourself as a child to come up. And you may think like, oh, I know, but let your unconscious mind bring up something. And then I'm going to ask you to deeply experience this child, and then to come in as the adult you, which is the resourced you. Maybe you're a parent yourself. Maybe you can come in and reparent that child and give the child what he or she didn't have in the moment. Okay? All right. So I invite you to close your eyes. And begin with the breath. Take a deep breath in through your nose, down into your belly, and exhale out through your mouth. Another deep breath in. And as you exhale, exhale out anything that is tense or tight or gray. Another breath in, deepest breath of the day. And as you exhale, just feel yourself dropping down into the body, out of that monkey mind. And just notice what's going on in there. There may be some places that are tense or tight. And just notice it's an act of compassion just to see what's happening in there. You're just checking in. And then imagine that there's this beautiful white liquid light above your head. And imagine that light entering in through the crown of your head. And as it touches all the muscles in your forehead, feel those muscles become very, very heavy, very relaxed, very warm. And feel that light filter down to touch the muscles around your eyes and behind your eyes. Let those muscles go. And feel that light flow into your temples and then down into your jaw. Loosen your jaw just a little bit. And then feel that warmth flow into your cheeks, around your nose, your lips, your chin. Taking another deep breath, feel that liquid light go down your throat, your neck, and onto your shoulders. Feel any knots loosening in your shoulders. And any worries, any burdens resting on your shoulders, just allow them to lift for a few moments, so perhaps you can begin to feel lighter. And any thoughts, any emotions rocking around in there, just imagine those becoming calmer with every breath you take. And now imagine the liquid light flowing down your shoulders, down both of your arms. Feel your arms very, very heavy at your side. On the next breath, feel that liquid light flow down the entire length of your spinal column, vertebrae by vertebrae. Feel all the muscles in your upper back, your middle back, your lower back. Completely let go. Allow yourself to sink even deeper into the chair, feeling safe and supported. Then on the next breath, feel that liquid light flow into your chest cavity and down into your abdomen. And feel the liquid light flow down over your hips, into your pelvis, down both of your legs. Feel all the muscles in your thighs let go, down over your knees, your calves, your ankles, and right down to the tips of your toes. And just imagine that with every breath you take, your muscles relax more and more. And now I invite you to allow an image of yourself as a child to come into focus in your mind's eye. And whatever age your unconscious mind gives you, just go with that age. And make this child very real. What is he or she wearing? What is the posture? The haircut? Where is this child? Perhaps somewhere in a childhood home, perhaps somewhere in nature. Just notice. There's no right or wrong. And now, if you can, imagine your adult self coming into the physical space of this child. And just notice, how do you feel towards this child? Is there compassion? Is there trepidation? Again, no right or wrong, just notice. And then notice how this child may feel towards you. Is he or she aware of your presence? Is there familiarity? Is there trust? Again, just notice, no right or wrong. And now, as the adult, ask this child, what does he or she need in this moment? And just listen for the response. And then, if you can, give your child what he or she needs in this moment. And if you've been able to do this, just notice if anything has shifted in the child. Maybe there's more trust. Maybe the body has relaxed. Maybe the facial expression has changed. Remember, change is possible. Healing is possible. You are never stuck. You do have the power as an adult to go back and access these inner parts of you, these children, and to give them what they didn't get in their early years. And now, knowing that you can reconnect with this child at any time in the future, scoop him or her up into your heart, keeping them safe, and perhaps making a vow that you'll begin to tend to these younger parts of you, to be more present, to be more caring. to begin this process of deep healing. And now, whenever you are ready, taking a few deep cleansing breaths in your own time, with soft eyes, coming back into the room, feeling wonderful. And thank you all so much for your attention and your presence this evening. Thank you.
One more round of applause or a clapper.
Thank you.